One of the things that audiences love the most about Family Guy is how little the creators care about being politically correct. They will do and say just about anything to get a laugh and worry about the repercussions later. Or not at all. It is totally unbelievable that they got away with these jokes on TV when some of us can't even imagine saying them out loud to another person. We'll start off a bit more mild and work our way into the really dark stuff. This first joke is surprising mostly for the fact that censors at the conservative Fox network let it get on the air in the first place. During a Halloween episode, Peter answers the door to a costumed Quagmire. While Quagmire is playing it pretty safe in a Napoleon Dynamite costume, Peter and Lois have taken a slightly more political route. Peter tells Quagmire that he's dressed as former First Lady Laura Bush, and Lois is the guy that she killed. And then they proceed to stand there and remind the audience that she did in fact kill a 17-year-old boy in a car accident and faced no consequences. After the Bill Cosby Scandal broke, we all knew that it was only a matter of time before the minds behind Family Guy got their hands on it. And boy did they ever. While everyone is watching TV, we hear an introduction for the show that is coming up next, which is referred to as The Cosby Show Knowing What We Know Now. And then they cut to a reimagined version of the classic TV opening where Bill Cosby is still dancing around wearing a colorful sweater, but with the addition of every female cast member asleep, presumably having been drugged by Cosby. It gets worse from there, but we'll let you see for yourself. Some of the younger viewers of the show might not be too familiar with this next joke, but for those who do get it, they know how seriously black Family Guy's humor has gotten over the years. At a school recital, it's revealed that Stewie is performing in a show called Terri Schiavo the Musical. If you don't know, Terri Schiavo is a woman who fell ill, ending up in an incurable vegetative state, and the legal case surrounding whether or not her husband had the right to take her off life support, as she would have wished to become a national sensation. And, of course, this is a terrible subject for an elementary school musical. Only in Quahog. Back in an earlier episode, Family Guy made a couple of jokes about former presidents that are pretty dark all around, but seem almost mild to the bar that they've raised for themselves ever since. In this bit, we see a boy leaving a store holding up his brand new JFK Pez Dispenser, really happy about his purchase. Of course, almost immediately, a bullet flies by and takes off its head. Just when you thought that would be the end of it, the kid pulls out another new toy that he's still happy to have. And what else could it be but a Bobby Kennedy Pez Dispenser? Ouch. The Elizabeth Smart case became a national sensation after the 14-year-old girl was abducted and held captive for 9 weeks. While she was eventually rescued, the details of her time in captivity are a nightmare. So, of course, that makes her the perfect fuel for a classic Family Guy bit. In an interview with her parents after her rescue, Elizabeth can be seen in the background gently playing the harp. While it seems as though things are back to normal in the Smart household, what her father says next takes a sharp turn back to reality. He says that while she plays beautiful songs on her harp, most of them are about, well, just about the worst thing that can happen to a human being. Because cancer affects so many people all over the world, some shows might go to lengths to avoid cracking jokes about it. But not our friends over at Family Guy. In a cutaway, we see a man who is clearly going through chemotherapy, supposedly inventing the idea of tying a bandana around his head to cover up his dramatic hair loss. He calls for his wife, who exclaims that he doesn't even look like he's sick anymore. At the very end of the awesome episode 3 Kings, that makes an excellent parody of 3 of Stephen King's most famous stories, they take a crack at the deceased actor and his brother Joaquin that might make fans of the late actor flinch. The episode's narrator talks about how River Phoenix overdosed outside of the famous nightclub The Viper Room and was ignored as he convulsed for 5 minutes. And then, just to get in another dig, he refers to Joaquin as the hair-lipped reminder of what might have been. For some reason, Family Guy's really become obsessed with Michael J. Fox in their later seasons. They went from making a ton of Back to the Future jokes early on to making joke after joke about his debilitating battle with Parkinson's disease. One of the longest bits they've done about it is when Peter sets up a cutaway about why he only has 2 white shirts. He had a third, but it was ruined at a wine tasting at Fox's house. Then, instead of cutting away to the scene, we simply cut to Peter standing alone explaining to the audience that showing the scene would just be too sad. And then they show it. Because Family Guy. We love a classic Family Guy cutaway. While stowing away in an attic in complete silence during World War II with Anne Frank and her family, Peter decides that now is the best time for a salty snack, and goes about munching loudly on a bag of chips. The crunch sounds resonate throughout the house, and Anne and her family are discovered. Peter's done some bad stuff in his day, but this has to be one of the worst. For a baby, Stewie has gotten into some seriously messed up situations. None more creepy than the episode in which he actually impregnates himself with Brian's babies so his family dog will have to pay more attention to him. We have so many feelings about this seriously messed up storyline, the biggest of which is how Family Guy even managed to make that funny. After becoming worried that Brian is losing interest in him, Stewie steals Brian's DNA and somehow impregnates himself with it without Brian knowing about it. And then he actually gives birth, or whatever you'd call it, to a disturbing litter of weird Brian-Stewie hybrid puppy things that really should never have existed. There are certain subjects that make television censors even more uncomfortable than they might actually make audiences, and that's why an entire episode of Family Guy was pulled from the air. In this particular episode, an old friend of Lois asks Lois if she would ever carry a child for her, and Lois agrees. But unfortunately, the woman passes away while Lois is still pregnant, which leads Lois to decide to terminate her pregnancy. This is, of course, one of the most hot-button subjects in American politics, so it's not exactly surprising that the Fox network didn't go for it. One episode that caused quite a bit of controversy among audiences was the one where they meet Quagmire's sister Brenda and her abusive boyfriend. While part of the episode is definitely about how wrong the way he treats her is and what a terrible person he is, there is no shortage of jokes at Brenda's expense. There's a running theme throughout about how Brenda is dumb for staying with her terrible boyfriend, and while she should find a way to leave, critics were not happy with this one-sided portrayal. Most people agree that the issue is way more layered and complicated than that, but Family Guy has no problem taking a stance and sticking to it, with no attention paid to what critics have to say. When Meg and Chris both end up at the same Halloween party, they unknowingly end up in a closet for a game of 7 Minutes in Heaven together. Of course, they can't tell because they're both in costume, but eventually the door is opened and the pair realize what exactly they've been doing. It's something that might make any sibling want to shower for 2 years straight, but Meg and Chris actually wind up feeling pretty chill about it. Ugh. Oh, Quagmire. We never know whether to love or loathe the Lothario who lives next door, but in this particular case, we're gonna go with loathe. The rivalry between Family Guy and The Simpsons has never been a secret, and this one bit featuring Quagmire really threw a whole bunch of fuel onto the fire. Towards the end of one episode, a fake promo for The Simpsons appears on screen with Marge waving at the camera. Quagmire enters and actually drags Marge off screen as she fights him. After, they re-enter and end up back in The Simpsons' house, where Quagmire actually winds up murdering the entire family. It's fair to say that they got a little bit of backlash about that one. While we could go on and on about the messed up Quagmire moments over the course of the show's history, there is one that sticks out a bit more above the rest. In the episode where Quagmire winds up trying to raise his surprise baby girl, it almost seemed as though she would be enough to make him change his womanizing ways. But in the end, he decides he's not the right person to raise little Anna Lee and says goodbye to her. Of course, the goodbye turns super creepy when he remarks, "Who knows, maybe I'll run into her in 18 years," prompting a who else but Quagmire from the show and the audiences alike. While gun violence in schools has become far too regular of an occurrence in the United States, it still seems like way too sensitive of a subject to make fun of on TV. And yet, joking about sensitive subjects on TV is exactly what Family Guy does best. In an episode where Peter and Lois trade places with Meg and Chris, Peter is figuring out what to wear to school. First, he comes out dressed as a teen girl, before Lois tells him to change. His next choice is the stereotypical outfit of a troubled teen, complete with camouflage pants, long black coat, and a huge gun. He claims he's planning to make the popular kids pay, but thankfully Lois tells him once again to change. There was one more Michael J. Fox joke that we had to include here because Family Guy just really seems intent on poking as much fun at the actor as humanly possible. In the episode where Peter gets a parrot and then becomes a pirate, his parrot unfortunately dies. This leads Peter to set up a cutaway gag that seems totally out of the blue and doesn't really make any sense at all. He says that he's made a huge mistake, just like Disney did when they cast Fox in the remake of The Mask of Zorro. We then cut to two men who point to an insignia left on the wall by a masked man, which turns out to just be one giant scribble. Family Guy has let it slip on more than one occasion that the Griffins have actually had more children than just Meg, Stewie, and Chris. In one short cutaway, we find Peter and Lois holding each other and crying in a cemetery in front of a tombstone with Peter Griffin Jr. written on it. Peter tells Lois that he thought shaking him would get Peter Jr. to stop crying. This bit made a huge impression when it first aired. The now classic prom night dumpster baby song is disturbing, not only for what the song is about, but also for how dang catchy it is. Not not exactly the tune you want to be caught singing to yourself in public, this song is a woeful tale of a baby who was ditched in a garbage bin on prom night. It's extremely upsetting to think about, and only Family Guy could turn something that terrible into an upbeat musical number that fans would be singing for years to come. No one but Family Guy would ever conceive of the idea of having a barbershop quartet sing a dying hospital patient their diagnosis, and that's exactly what they did. The You Have AIDS barbershop quartet is possibly the most infamous Family Guy joke of all time, and for good reason. It's super dark, but in the silliest of ways, and one of those jokes that you can't help but laugh at, even if it is in a pained, groaning sort of way. Sometimes it's amazing to think that any of this made it to air in the first place. What did you think of this list? Do you love Family Guy for the risks they take, or do you think they go too far? Let us know down below, and we hope you had fun watching.